If there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
All right, let's bring in Nancy Cordes. She is standing by on Capitol Hill, right where House Speaker Paul Ryan just spoke. So, Nancy, we played that soundbite for our viewers so that they can understand the context of what's being discussed right now. What did you take away from what House Speaker Paul Ryan had to say?
Well, he basically punted, Vlad, on the question of whether Attorney General Sessions had perjured himself in that Q&A. He said he hasn't read the transcript and he's leaving that up to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is where that exchange took place. But on the larger matter of whether Sessions should recuse himself or, as some Democrats are arguing, should resign, he said that he doesn't believe that there's anything wrong with Attorney General Sessions having met with the Russian ambassador when he was a senator, and he thinks that it's up to Attorney General Sessions to do what he wants to do in that regard. Now, many of his Republican colleagues have gone farther than that. They have said that whether Sessions did anything wrong or not, whether he misspoke or whether he intentionally misled the committee, that the best thing for everyone, and frankly, they think the best thing to stop the bleeding at this point, would be for Sessions to recuse himself from this investigation into whether anyone in the administration had contact with the Russians when Donald Trump was running for president. Even before this question came up about whether or not he lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee in his confirmation hearings, there were some Republicans and many Democrats who felt that because he was part of the campaign, Vlad and Rena, that he just couldn't be impartial when it came to these kinds of questions.
So, Nancy, the White House is saying, look, he met Senator Sessions at the time was in the House Armed Services Committee, a senator. He was meeting as his capacity as a senator. Other Dems, of course, not buying that. Walk us through this. When a member of Congress meets with a foreign government official, are they required to report that? And are they required to bring in a staffer to take notes on exactly what was discussed?
They're not required to report it. And even the House Speaker a few minutes ago said, look, I just met with a big bunch of ambassadors last week. It's incredibly common for members of Congress to meet with foreign diplomats. There's nothing unusual about that. And even the lead Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, said earlier today, there's nothing wrong with Attorney General Sessions meeting with the Russian ambassador. Nothing wrong at all. What he says is the problem here is that even though Sessions knew that this was an incredibly sensitive issue at the time that he had his confirmation hearing, he claimed, both in the hearing and in written answers to senators on that committee, that he hadn't engaged with any Russian officials about the campaign, and they believe more broadly that he was saying he hadn't met with Russian officials at all in 2016. And beyond that, Schumer argued that it's very common for people who testify under oath to go back and look at their testimony after they've made it, and if they made any incorrect statements, to go back and correct the record, just to make sure that they don't land in this very situation. He argued that as a former prosecutor, as a longtime member of Congress, Senator Sessions knew this very well during his testimony and chose not to correct the record.
So many angles to this story, Nancy. We look forward to your reporting tonight on the CBS Evening News. Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.